A young man, Alex, stood transfixed before the ornate vintage mirror that dominated one wall of the dimly lit room. Dust motes danced in the single beam of moonlight, slicing through the attic window, illuminating the gilded frame and the dark, reflective surface within. He had found the mirror in a forgotten corner of his new home, a relic from a previous owner. As he ran a hand through his hair, a disquieting sensation prickled the back of his neck. He lowered his hand, but the figure in the glass seemed to hold the pose for a fraction of a second longer before its arm dropped. Chalking it up to a trick of the low light and his own tired eyes, Alex tried again, raising his left hand slowly. His reflection followed suit, but there it was again, a subtle, almost imperceptible delay, as if the image were an echo of his own movement, trailing just behind reality. A cold knot began to form in his stomach. The room, once just old and musty, now felt heavy with a silent, watching presence. Driven by a mix of morbid curiosity and rising panic, Alex began to test the mirror's strange properties. He started with a simple, quick wave. The reflection waved back, but the motion was noticeably out of sync, completing the gesture a full second after he had already lowered his arm. His heart hammered against his ribs. He escalated his movements, jerking his head from side to side, then performing a series of rapid, frantic gestures. The delay grew more pronounced with each action. The gap stretched from a split second to several agonizing seconds, turning the reflection into a grotesque pantomime of his own frantic energy. Close-ups would capture the beads of sweat forming on his brow, his eyes wide with a dawning, primal fear. The figure in the glass was no longer just a reflection. It was a separate entity, a puppet on a string that was slowly but surely being cut. He stared into its eyes, his own eyes, and saw nothing of his own terror reflected back, only a cold, placid emptiness. Summoning every ounce of self-control, Alex froze, standing perfectly still, his breath hitched in his throat. He willed his body into absolute stillness, a statue of flesh and bone before the malevolent glass. For a moment there was silence of perfect, terrifying symmetry. Then the impossible happened. While Alex remained motionless, his muscles locked in a rictus of fear, the reflection began to move. It was a slow, deliberate motion, independent and utterly chilling. The reflection's hand, a perfect copy of his own, down to the smallest scar on the knuckle, began to rise. It lifted its fingers as if to wave, not in a friendly gesture, but with a slow, menacing grace. Then the reflection's lips, which had been set in the same neutral line as his, curled upwards. At the corners it smiled. It was not his smile. It was a thin, predatory grin, a mask of triumph stretched over his own familiar features, promising unspeakable things. A strangled gasp escaped Alex's throat, shattering the silence. The illusion was broken, replaced by a stark, horrifying reality. He stumbled backward, his feet tangling in the clutter on the attic floor, his eyes locked on the grinning doppelganger. He scrambled away, desperate to put distance between himself and the mirror, but his terror was met with a final, unthinkable act. The reflection did not simply watch him go. With the same fluid, unnatural grace, it took a step forward. Its polished shoe crunched on the non-existent floor of its mirrored world, and then it breached the silver plane. One leg, then the other, emerged from the glass as if stepping through a doorway of liquid mercury. The figure, now fully formed and solid in the room with him, stood bathed in the pale moonlight, its predatory smile widening. Alex opened his mouth to scream, but before any sound could escape, the screen plunged into absolute blackness.